pyramid. So that's basically what you're doing most of the time. Now, if you're not getting that right, then any techniques you use around training and for recovery and things like that, they are just not going to be as effective. So we always encourage everyone to look at their base nutrition first, and if there's any improvement that they can make there before stepping it up and then looking at recovery techniques and fueling training techniques. And then once you've got that right, the training techniques and the fueling pre-training, then that's when you start to look at supplements. So a lot of my clients will come into the office and they will start with what supplements should I be taking. And it's the last thing that you should be thinking about. So you've probably all come across different supplements on the market like creatine and beetroot juice and beta-alanine and all these different things. None of those are going to be effective if you don't get the base of the pyramid right. And a lot of people don't even need to go into that area, but there are some things that might be useful for you guys, and it's on a very individual basis. And I'll talk a little bit about that towards the end. So, as I've got here, the base of the pyramid is your focus on a well-balanced diet, making sure that you're getting good variety every day and you're hitting all your marks every day. And then after that, you look at if you're fueling training correctly, if you're recovering well, and then practicing your day-to-day nutrition. And then on top of that is the dietary supplements, which is the 1%, the cherry on top. And it doesn't make as much difference as what people might believe, as what the people selling the products might lead you to believe. So, first up, base nutrition. You've probably all seen this very basic picture that floats around the kids' schoolwork and things like that. So this is your Australian Guide to Healthy Eating. It's very boring, it's very basic, but we do keep coming back to it because it's important to understand. So you've got your 5 basic food groups here. The main one there is going to be your breads and cereals. So that incorporates everything from breads, grains, pastas, rice, things like couscous, and things like that. And it includes white and whole grain. So there is a place for low fibre foods, and I'll talk to you about that in a tick. And then this section here is vegetables. So the recommendation for vegetables is getting 5 serves a day. So a serve is about half a cup of cooked vegetables or a cup of salad. Only 4% of Australians get it, so if you're not getting it, then don't beat yourself up, just like work towards trying to get more in. No one gets enough vegetables, or most people that I meet find it very hard to get in vegetables, enough vegetables, so that's something that everyone can do better because they are very important. Then we've got fruits down here, remembering that in the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, foods are grouped together because they provide similar nutrients. So you've got fruit here, and then dairy foods or dairy alternative foods. If you're someone that eats alternative dairy foods, you need to make sure that it's fortified with calcium, otherwise it doesn't fit into that category. And then you've got your protein foods. That includes vegetarian sources of protein as well, like tofu, tempeh, nuts and seeds, things like that. There's eggs, but then you've got all of your meat products, fish, chicken, things like that. So they're the foods that should make up the base of your diet, and then everything else is a discretionary food. So I'm very careful about how I talk about these foods because I don't like people to feel bad for eating something that they like, and I think that all foods have a place in our diet. You shouldn't, you don't need to earn food. You don't need to, work hard to be able to eat something that you like. If you feel like eating something nice, then you should be able to freely eat that and know what an appropriate portion is. Yeah. But keeping in mind that these foods are low nutrient, and when you are as active as you guys are, you do need the nutrition to maintain a healthy body. Okay. So I'll talk a bit more about that in a tick. So that's all very complicated sometimes. So what I get people to do, and I understand that you have just all done food diaries for Timeman, so this will be useful for you, but what I usually get people to do is to first off have a look at their diet and ask these questions. Are you eating 3 meals a day with 2 or 3 snacks in between? spread out evenly because because you're using up so much fuel, you need to spread your meals evenly. And when you're recovering, you need to provide your body with both carbohydrate and protein spread evenly over the day. So the easiest way to do that is make sure you're eating regularly. If you don't eat regularly, you often get a rebound hunger, you can overeat, and then all the problems start. So that's the first question to ask. The next one is, are you eating every 3 hours, particularly if you're training that day? The next one is, at main meals, are you getting three food groups in there? If you're not, you're probably not going to be hitting your mark for your intake for each of those for the day. So an example might be breakfast, you might have cereal with milk and fruit. That's 3 food groups. Or you might have toast with baked beans and spinach on the side. Do you understand what I mean? Yep. And then for lunch, you might have a roll with some tuna and salad. Or you might have some eggs with some toast and some baked beans, or something like that. Yep. So look at your plate and go, okay, have I got 3 different food groups? Doesn't matter what they are. If there's not 3 food groups there, what can you add to balance it out? Yep. And then the next question that you ask, in terms of variety, is are you eating 20 different foods in a day? So they can be from the same food group. So I usually get people to try and look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 system. So are you getting a minimum of 1 serve of protein, minimum 2 serves of fruit, which is about a handful, 3 serves of dairy or alternatives, particularly important for women, and 4 serves of high fibre grains. You will need more than that, but you need a minimum of that. And then 5 different colours of vegetables. So if you can look at your own food diaries and ask those questions, and sometimes you can see places where improvements could be made, and then you can have a little think and modify things. And then the last point there is to include healthy fats. So using canola and olive oil for cooking, and then including seeds and nuts and things like that. They're important as well. And then you ask yourself, are you hydrated? So this little chart here is what I'll often use for clients. There's more in-depth ones that you can use, but this one's a good guide. And I usually ask, swimmers are notorious for not drinking enough, because you can't take your bottle with you on your back. But when you're in the pool, you can make an extra leg bottle there, and in between sets, have some fluid, particularly on the long sets. So what I usually tell people to do is to check your urine through the day. First thing in the morning, it shouldn't be deep yellow, and it shouldn't smell. It should be a straw colour. It doesn't need to be clear. If it's clear, you're well hydrated, but you probably don't need to be drinking as much water as you are. But it shouldn't be a deep yellow. So check what colour your urine is. It's often the best guide to how well you're hydrated. If you are dehydrated in the morning and then you go and train, you will often not be able to train as hard as what you'd like to. So the next one there is how to portion your main meals in terms of fuel. So when you're increasing your physical activity, the fuel you need to replace is carbohydrate. That's the main thing you need, and it's often overlooked because it gets a bit of a bad rap. So with your main meals, I try to get people to make sure that they are portioning their plates a bit like this. So half the plate should be veggie salad or something like that. A quarter should be some kind of protein, and then a quarter should be carbohydrates. So just about anything can fit into that. If you think of dinner foods, so if you're having, say, bolognese, you could have pasta, bolognese, and then salad on the side. Or if you're having steak, you have steak, some mashed potatoes, or like roasted potatoes, and then salad on the side. Or it could be a stir fry made up of a lot of vegetables with some stripped meat and then some rice. So it's good to think about your portions. So that you can get consistency through the week. Okay, and the next one is to choose high fibre products. So fibre is obviously important for your gut health. It's also important to keep us full. For swimmers, it is also important to choose some things that aren't so high in fibre, because they can obviously fill you up quick, and you need to somehow get that carbohydrate back in to fuel you for your next session. So there is a place for low fibre foods, but you do need to still be getting enough over the day. And then the last one's high calcium. Looking after your bones is really important. You probably all know this, but your peak bone mass is reached in your 20s. And after that, it just decreases. So if you're not consuming enough calcium, then you're at risk of osteoporosis later in life and things like that. Okay? So that's your base nutrition. That's really brief, and I hope it's given you something to go back and reflect on. And now I'm going to talk more specific to athletes. Okay? So this next slide is quite important. It's a bit busy, but I'll just try and talk you through it. So red S in the centre is relative energy deficiency in sport. So the more research that's done around this, the more we are finding that athletes who are training with high loads, you might assume that you would just, if you weren't fueling your body well, you might just lose weight, and that would be an indication that you're not eating enough. But what we're finding more is that athletes' bodies find a way to fuel their activity and then to shut other systems in their body down and maintain the weight all the same. And that's called relative energy deficiency. And what it manifests as is initially it will be things like fatigue. Your immune system will go because you're not able to support your immune system. Females start to have interferences with their menstrual cycle, and then that can lead to poor bone health later on. And then things like you're not able to keep up with the training, you might not be sleeping well, you might not be able to concentrate at work as well, and then it can lead to irritability, depression, and things like that. But it all starts with not fueling your training well, and it doesn't this doesn't necessarily come along with sudden weight loss.
And can I just add on that, Claire? There's a lot of research says how underdiagnosed this is in amateur athletes. I think people see this and go, just the professional athletes, but it's actually very rife in like the weekend warrior type athletes when you're taking on training loads like you are for a solo.
Yeah, so it is something to be aware of, and all those little signs and symptoms there, you have to keep an eye out for. Because if you're, and as a side to that, if you're not able to perform well at training and recover well, then you're not going to be making the most of those sessions that you're doing. But also, you might be doing yourself more harm than good. And often it can end in injury, or it can end in an illness, and then that can put a halt to your training, and then it rolls on from there. So it is important that you fuel your body well, and that you fuel your training sessions well. Okay? I don't want to scare you all. You've all got a like blank face on now. Okay. So I just want to give you a revision on what a carbohydrate food is. So carbohydrates are fuel for your body. It is what makes your muscles move, and it is what pushes you through the pool. Okay? It's just carbohydrates. That's what we need. All right? To do that. So all the foods that provide your body with carbohydrates are the breads and cereals, which we went over before. Any starchy veggies, although not all starchy veggies are equal in their content that they can provide. Your dairy is good, and then fruit products. So that can include dry fruit, or it can include tin fruit. Yeah.
Just quickly, is pumpkin included in that starchy
There's
vegetable?
not enough in there. Yeah. And then any food that contains sugar will provide you with carbohydrates. And as I said before, these foods do have a place in your diet, and athletes do use them sometimes to make sure that they're getting enough fuel. Okay, so all the foods in here will provide some sort of carbohydrate, but your base diet should be around those main food groups. Yeah.
Is there any you recommend more than this? I think you would recommend like a cookie or like 5 cookies every day. Yeah. Is there another carbohydrate that you would say is better? That's a really good one.
Yeah, so that's a tricky one. It's going to be different for everyone. So I still recommend that you base your diet around the healthy food groups. I shouldn't say healthy, but the main food groups.
Yeah.
So that would include things like breakfast cereals and dairies and fruits and all your rices and pastas and potatoes and things like that. But there still is a place for a chocolate milk after training. Do you know what I mean? And there still is a place for a coffee and a muffin after a training, if that, and I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, just as long as the rest of your diet is providing all the nutrients that you need for the day. Yep, but it is a very individual thing. Okay, so that's carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is your fuel, and that's what we need to eat regularly through the day, and that's what we need enough of to prevent any lag in training or fatigue and things like that. And I'll get to the amounts in a second. So the next thing is protein. So protein is also important in athletes. When you train, you are providing your muscles with a stimulus to adapt, right? So for your muscles to adapt to that stimulus you've just provided, you need to give your body protein so it can lay down new foundation. Does that make sense? Yeah. So say when you are lifting weights and you are sending a signal to your muscle to grow, basically, you now need to give the muscle the building blocks to grow. And that is also the case for endurance athletes. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you do need protein, but we don't need as much as what most people believe. What we do need is we need small amounts that are spread evenly through the day, and then you need a certain amount right after training so that your muscles can use that for adaptation. But we don't need a large amount at dinner time, or we don't need protein shakes. It's the carbohydrate that we actually need, okay? So it is important to spread protein through the day, and that is a mistake that athletes often make, because for 24 hours after you're trained, your muscles are still adapting to the stimulus that you provided, and so you need to continue to give it the protein, okay? Yeah. All right, so now we'll talk about a bit more about specific nutrition around training. So with pre-training fuel, the aim is that you don't want to feel bloated. You need to provide your body with a form of glucose that's going to be digested quickly and be able to be used for fuel. And it needs to be something familiar. I'm sure you've all trained on like a full tummy and felt what that might feel like, or you've had the wrong thing before training and felt what that might feel like. Training on an empty tummy is very common, particularly if you're going to be getting up early in the morning. Carmen has her sessions so early. But it is important to get used to having something in your stomach before you train. So it might be different for everyone, but it needs to be something that's digested fast, which means it doesn't have fibre in it, it doesn't have fat in it, and it's high in glucose. So this is where things like fruit juice or a piece of fruit or something like that can come in handy. Rice cakes, depending on what time of the day you're training, you might feel like something a bit different towards the end of the day, but often it's the morning that people struggle with. But this is also an opportunity for you to practice what you're going to do on race day, because you are not going to start that race on an empty stomach. You're going to have something before you start. Yeah? Okay? Now, after training, what you need is carbohydrates to replace the fuel that you have just used up, and then you need protein to help with the recovery of your muscles, okay? So you have a window of around 30 minutes to 1 hour to get that nutrition in. Now, your body will recover in the next 24 hours if you don't make that window, but if you're going to train the next day, then you want to make that window. And the other thing that making this window does is it helps with that 3 p.m. fatigue that everyone feels, and the 3 p.m. lunchies that everyone feels. You will find that you don't have the same hunger through the whole day if you manage to meet that window. So it's very simple. All it just needs to be planned. And as I said, a chocolate milk after training, there is definitely a place for that, because it provides protein from the milk, and it's one of the sources of protein that the body's muscles best respond to is from milk, and then it provides carbohydrate in the form of sugar and lactose. Okay, so it hits those marks. You can buy smoothies in containers that you can just have on the way home. You could have fruit juice and a nut bar, or you could have there's so many different options. But the things I've got here, and I've got a whole other list here. The things I've got here are things that you might want to take with you. But if you can get home in 10 minutes and have your breakfast, then that's obviously going to be a good option as well, right? So if you've got Bircher muesli in the fridge ready to go, or if you're about to eat porridge and add fruit, or if you're going to have some eggs on toast, so your breakfast will generally cover your requirements if you are going to get home in time. Does that make sense? Now, if you're training in the afternoon, then you might choose to take one of those pre-prepared smoothies in the bag, so you can have something on the way home. Or if you live far away, then you might want to have a muesli bar and a bit of fruit in your bag to make sure that you're going to meet those requirements before you get home. But it's all about planning. So this is important. It's important for both the prevention of the reduced energy deficiency, relative energy deficiency, but it's also important if you're going to train the next day. Okay? Now during training, this is where Kynie comes in. I've only got a few slides left. So during training and during competition, the two things that you need are fluid and fuel, and you don't need much else. So there's a lot of research around electrolytes, and there's a lot of research around protein and endurance athletes, but currently what we know is all you need is fluid and fuel, and if you hit those marks, then it's all up to you, because you're doing the best for your body that you can. So fluid requirements are different for everyone, and it's important that you try and figure out what you need. So I've had some athletes that really don't need much more than 400 mils an hour, and I have athletes who need up to 750 mils or more an hour to maintain hydration. A good way of testing is if you're going to have a long swim, then you can weigh yourself in your bathers beforehand, jump out after, towel yourself off, and then weigh yourself after and just see how much weight you've lost, because that is how much fluid you have lost. Okay? It's obviously going to depend on the conditions and as to how much fluid you lose, but it is a good idea to get used to consuming fluid while you're swimming and to manage that the gut reaction. So this is actually very important, and I want to highlight this. You need to train your gut just like you need to train your body. So you can't do anything new on race day. Whatever you're planning to do on race day, you need to practice it in training. Whatever fluids you're going to take, whatever food you're going to eat, whatever gels you're going to try, they all need to be practiced in training. And for some people it can take just as long to train their gut as it takes to train your body. And that includes what you're going to eat beforehand. You don't want to do anything new, you want to have it all set out. Okay? So, fluids, 500 to 750 mils an hour is generally what most people require. Now any training session that you are doing that's longer than 60 minutes, you should be fueling that. So you should be fueling it however you want to, with Powerade or gels or whatever you plan on doing on race day. And what we aim for is between 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate an hour. Start small, because some people have the gut upset. And for example, one bottle of Powerade, which is 600 mils, has got 30 grams of carbohydrate in it. One gel has got about 25 grams of carbohydrate in it. But with a gel, you need to have a whole cup of water so you don't get your tummy ache. Yeah. So try all these different things, try different brands, and find what works for you. But you will not be able to swim that whole way without having fuel, so you have to figure something out. Yeah.
There's quite a few gels on the market.
Yeah.
Do you recommend any in particular, or is it just whatever you decide to manage?
Whatever you like. Yeah, they're all pretty similar. Some of them will have caffeine. Some of them have tried to go the salty way because you get flavour fatigue from all the sweetness. There's a few brands that have tried to use more natural products. Like there's one called Awesome Sauce that was getting around, and that was based on apple, I think. And then some of them are a bit more liquid, and then some of them are like honey. So you just have to try, and it's also what you can get access to, because the normal sports nutrition shops don't sell all of the things that you need. You have to go into Google. There's a few examples in Rebel out there that you can just grab a few and see what you like. But others, you order them on the internet. Yeah. So just see what you like. Yeah.
Just on the mention of caffeine,
Yeah.
what are your recommendations on caffeinating throughout the swim?
Yeah. So there is evidence that caffeine is an effective ergogenic aid, definitely. And the recommendation is about 3 milligrams per kilogram. So it's usually about 100. It's usually like one no dose that you'll take. I think it's about 1 and 2. It's probably about 2. But that's about a cup of coffee. So that's like a full cup of coffee. But if you're going to try it as an ergogenic aid, we recommend using something that's measured. So like a no dose or something like that, so that you know how much you require. The recommendation is that you take it before you race. It has a half-life of about 3 to 5 hours, so you need to take, which means that half will still be in your system in 5 hours time. So you will space it out. You'll take some at the beginning, and then you take some at say the 4 hour mark, and then you go on. Some people like to use Coke at the end instead of just taking caffeine, flat Coke. And then obviously the gel's caffeinated as well. But there is evidence for it.
There's also evidence that it decreases your pain reception
So
as well.
That's basically how it works. It reduces your perception of effort. And there are a few physiological things going on in there, but they, it's mostly the reduction in perception of effort.
And it's also, you know, when you've been kind of in your own head for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours and you get into a bit of a zombie-like state, it's good to have a little bit of a kick, you know, a bit of a wake-up.
But again,
Good gums as well, the caffeine gums as well, that's easy.
Oh, yeah.
and there's the Revy strips as well. You can just buy strips.
Oh, yes.
But again, it needs to be measured. If you're going to do that in a race, you absolutely have to practice it because some people can have funny reactions with high doses.
Those Revies.
Did you say 3 milligrams per?
Zen gave me one of them.
Can you like over caffeinate or caffeinate too soon? Like say if you're saying to your paddlers like, no, I feel like I need a little boost, say at like a 3 hour mark or something. Is it better to stick to say the 4 hour half-life or?
No, but you need to practice it. Because everyone is going to be different. And obviously how we metabolize caffeine is, there's a big individual variation. So that's up to you to practice. And no, it's not gonna, I mean, you've probably had a coffee in the morning and then a coffee close together, do you know? So you just have to practice it.
I didn't practice all my caffeine for one of my solo swims, and I was doing the 25 Ultra, and I got to 18 Ks, and my body just crashed because I had a caffeine gel shot every 2 hours, and my body just couldn't take any more food on. So it's really important, like you're saying, just to try it out. Like, you know, do 10 Ks with it, try it out.
Absolutely. So you can actually consume up to 90 grams of carbohydrate an hour, but it needs to be multi-transportable carbohydrates, which most of the sports foods are now. And then again, that needs to be built up to. So with some of my Ironman athletes, then they can get up to that, but that's a lot. So if I'd start with 30 to 60, and you have to think about how you get that in, how often you want to stop. So these are some options that some of my Roto swimmers have used. It doesn't always have to be the sports foods, and you have to think if you're going to be in the water for an hour, or for a lot of hours, then you want a lot of options, and you want to be able to change your mind if you feel like it in the water. So you want to have things that have different flavours and different mouth feel. You have to remember how the salt water makes your mouth feel after all those hours, and sometimes different temperatures, cold and then hot. Some people like to use the Milo in squeezy bottles. So that's something that Carmen will talk more about. So this is on competition day. So this is just a very general guide of what you need to think about for competition day. So the first one there, sorry, that's very small writing. I just made the picture big. The first one there is carbohydrate loading. I'm not going to go into that, but all of you should consider it and look into it. It's not as simple as just eating a whole lot of pasta the night before. There is a technique, and it is again something that needs to be practiced. So if you're going to be doing the qualifying race for 10Ks, then it could be a good time to practice it then. It is easy to do when you know how. You just need to be consuming a lot of low fibre carbohydrate foods, but there is a mark that you need to try and hit in terms of how many grams you're getting in over the day for it to be effective. Again, don't try anything new on race day, and make sure that you're hydrated on race day. Don't forget about that. So the race nutritionists consider putting your feeds in hourly packs for your crew. Making sure you have extra of everything, which I mentioned before, just in case you feel like changing your mind, or if something's actually working. Keep hot items in the thermos, and keep on top of your race nutrition. This is really, really important. Don't start too late. the number one reason that ultra marathoners, and I'm talking more runners than swimmers, but the number one reason why they don't complete a race is because of GI issues, gut issues. And it's always because they haven't practiced their nutrition, or they started too late, or they're not keeping on top of their hydration. You have to remember that your body will not digest food if you're not hydrated properly. It will just sit there. So you have to keep on top of both, okay? And again, after the race, if you want to spend the whole week in bed, that's fine. If you don't, make sure you recover properly and you've got that 30-minute window to get that nutrition in, okay? So this is just an example of something that I wrote up for one of my athletes. So that's what it might look like. So that's what you might do yourself to figure out how much carbohydrate you're going to get in every hour, how you're going to do it, how many mils of fluid you're going to get in. And this is obviously a goal, but you want to try and stick to it as much as you can, and you'll be able to figure out your own there as well. Kyle will give you all these as well. She'll give you these slides. So you'll have a copy. And now I think